Have you ever heard that saying, when Ramadan begins, the gates of paradise are open, the gates of hell are closed, and the devils are chained? It's something you hear a lot around this time of year, but it always makes me wonder, what does that really mean? I mean, is Satan literally put on lockdown for a month? And if so,
Yeah,
why do we still have to work so hard at resisting temptation during Ramadan?
that's a great question, and it's one that many people grapple with.
Yeah,
The imagery of the chained devils is powerful, but it's not meant to be taken literally.
right.
Islamic scholars see it more as a metaphor.
Okay, so less about a celestial jail cell, more about something deeper going on.
Exactly. It's about a shift in spiritual energy.
Okay,
During Ramadan, Shaitan's influence is weakened, his whispers are quieter, but temptation definitely doesn't just disappear. It's more that through fasting prayer and focusing on the Quran, we're building up our defenses, like we're creating a spiritual shield.
so it's less about the absence of temptation and more about being better equipped to deal with it. That makes a lot more sense. But before we get into all of that, I think it would be helpful to understand who the Shaitan character is and what his motives are. What's his deal?
Well, Shaitan, also known as Iblis in Islamic tradition, actually has a fascinating origin story. He wasn't always the embodiment of evil.
Interesting.
In fact, he was once a devoted angel who worshipped Allah for thousands of years.
Thousands of years, wow.
But when Allah created Adam, he commanded all the angels to bow before him. All of them obeyed except for Iblis.
Why not? What was his problem?
It all boiled down to pride. Iblis saw himself as superior to Adam because he was created from fire while Adam was created from clay. This arrogance was his undoing. As a result, Allah cursed him and banished him from paradise.
Ah, pride sounds like a classic case of don't let your ego write checks that your character can't cash, right? But Shaitan didn't just take his punishment lying down, did he?
No, he definitely did not. Before leaving paradise, he made a vow to lead humanity astray to tempt them away from Allah. There's even a verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Araf 7.160-17, where Shaitan essentially outlines his strategy, his game plan, if you will.
So he's made it his mission to tempt us all, which means that understanding his tactics is pretty crucial if we're going to resist him, right? It's like knowing your opponent's moves in a game of chess.
Absolutely. The more we understand how Shaitan operates, the better prepared we are to counter his moves.
Okay, so back to Ramadan and this idea of Shaitan's influence being weakened. You mentioned fasting prayer and Quran recitation creating this spiritual shield. Can you unpack that a little bit more? How does that actually work?
Well, if you think about it, one of Shaitan's main weapons is our own desires. He whispers temptations related to our hunger, our anger, our jealousy, you name it.
Right.
And fasting helps us control those desires.
Right. It's like there's this hadith where the Prophet Muhammad compares Shaitan's movement in the body to blood flow and how fasting restricts that flow, like cutting off his supply lines.
Exactly. By controlling those desires, we're essentially disarming him.
Which makes a lot of sense. I mean, we all know how much harder it is to make good decisions when we're hungry or stressed out.
It's like our defenses are down, but Ramadan is about so much more than just resisting temptation. If we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it's really about something much more profound. Strengthening our willpower and discipline, training ourselves to resist those negative influences in all aspects of our lives.
So it's like a spiritual boot camp. We're pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones to build spiritual muscles.
That's a great way to put it. We're training ourselves not just to avoid bad things, but to develop positive habits that will benefit us long after Ramadan is over.
This all makes a lot of sense, but there's something that's still bugging me. If Shaitan is supposed to be chained up, so to speak, during Ramadan, why do some people still give in to temptation and sin during this holy month?
That's a really important point, and it gets to the heart of a crucial concept in Islam, the idea that we have another enemy besides Shaitan to contend with, our own nafs.
Nafs, could you remind us what that means?
The nafs is often translated as our lower self, our ego, the part of us that wants instant gratification, even if it's not good for us in the long run.
So even though Shaitan's whispers are quieter, we still have our own bad habits and desires. We can lead us astray. It's like an internal battle.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If we've been listening to Shaitan's whispers all year, our nafs has been learning those bad habits. It develops this kind of muscle memory for sin. So even without the coach, so to speak, we might still find ourselves performing the bad habit out of habit.
It's like we have to train ourselves to recognize those negative impulses and resist them. We can't just rely on Shaitan being out of commission for a month.
That's exactly right. And it's important to remember that even with Shaitan's influence weakened, the dunya is still out there.
Ah, the dunya. You mean like all the distractions and temptations of the material world, social media, TV, all that stuff?
Precisely. Those things can still lead us towards sin even without Shaitan directly whispering in our ears. Think about how easily we can get pulled into hours of mindless scrolling or watching things that don't really benefit us.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. It's like our brains are wired for distraction these days. So even during Ramadan, when we're supposed to be focused on our spiritual growth, we still have to be vigilant about guarding ourselves against the pull of the dunya.
Absolutely. Self-discipline is paramount, especially during this month. We have to make a conscious choice to focus on pleasing Allah and resisting the allure of worldly distractions.
So it sounds like we have a trifecta of challenges. Shaytan, our own nafs, and the distractions of the dunya. Not exactly a walk in the park, huh?
You got it. But here's the thing. Ramadan is not all doom and gloom and battling temptation. It's also a time of immense opportunity. It's a chance to reset our habits, strengthen our connection with Allah, and really build lasting spiritual strength.
I love that perspective. It's not just about avoiding the bad stuff, but actively cultivating good habits and practices that will nourish our souls. So Ramadan is like a spiritual reset, a chance to hit the refresh button on our lives.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's important to remember that Ramadan is also a time of incredible divine mercy. Our good deeds are multiplied, and it's a prime opportunity for seeking forgiveness and starting fresh.
I've always been curious about that idea of wiping the slate clean. Does that mean we can completely erase our past mistakes? Or is there more to it than that?
It's not just about forgetting the past. It's about acknowledging our shortcomings, seeking forgiveness, and making a conscious effort to do better moving forward. It's about setting ourselves up for success in the future.
So it's less about erasing the past and more about using it as a springboard for growth.
Exactly. It's about learning from our mistakes and using those lessons to propel us forward on our spiritual journey.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. What happens when Ramadan ends and Shaytan is, well, let's say, back in business? Are we just thrown back into the deep end left to fend for ourselves?
It's true that Shaytan doesn't just disappear after Ramadan. In fact, some scholars suggest he comes back with even more intensity because he's angry that we've spent a month strengthening our faith.
Oh, great. So all that hard work we put in during Ramadan could just go out the window.
Not necessarily. Remember, Ramadan is all about building those lasting habits. It's like learning to ride a bike. Once you've mastered it, you don't suddenly forget how. But you do need to keep practicing, keep honing those skills.
So we need to keep up those good habits we cultivated during Ramadan. Prayer, fasting, reciting the Quran, all of that.
Exactly. Think of those practices as your spiritual armor, protecting you from Shaitan's influence and helping you stay strong in your faith.
But I imagine it can't be easy. Going from a month of intense spiritual focus back to the daily grind, it's got to be tough. It's like coming home from boot camp and suddenly you're surrounded by donuts and reality TV.
It definitely takes effort, but that's where the real test lies. The true measure of Ramadan's impact isn't how we behave during the month itself, but how we live our lives afterwards. Do we fall back into old patterns, or do we continue striving for righteousness?
So it's all about making a conscious choice day in and day out to live in accordance with our values, even when it's challenging. We've got the tools and the training. Now it's up to us to use them.
You've got it. It's about integrating those Ramadan lessons into our daily lives, making faith a part of our everyday routine, not just a once-a-year event.
That's a powerful message. So it sounds like the real secret of Ramadan isn't about Shaitan being chained up. It's about using this time to empower ourselves to build that lasting spiritual strength that will carry us through the rest of the year.
Precisely. It's about tapping into the incredible potential that we all have within us to resist temptation, to choose good over evil, and to strengthen our connection with the divine.
It's almost like Ramadan gives us a glimpse of what's possible when we prioritize our spiritual growth, when we make a conscious effort to cultivate those positive qualities within ourselves.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we have the strength to overcome challenges and resist negative influences.
This has been incredibly insightful. But I'm also curious, what does all of this mean for our listener who might not be Muslim but is still interested in exploring these ideas? How can they apply these lessons of Ramadan to their own lives?
That's a great question. I think there are some universal takeaways here that anyone can benefit from. Firstly, recognize the power of discipline, whether it's through fasting meditation or simply setting aside time for quiet reflection. Creating space for spiritual practice can make a huge difference in our lives.
It's like hitting the pause button on the craziness of everyday life and giving ourselves a chance to recharge and refocus. I think we could all use a little bit of that, right?
Absolutely. And secondly, it's about being mindful of what we consume, not just food, but information, entertainment, and even the company we keep. Are these things nourishing our souls or draining us?
Because let's be real, scrolling through social media for hours on end isn't exactly feeding our spiritual hunger.
Definitely not. And finally, remember that we're not alone in this struggle. We all have moments of weakness. We all face temptations. But by building a support system of like-minded people, by seeking guidance from those we respect, we can stay on track and keep moving forward on our spiritual journey.
So it's about building healthy habits, finding our tribe, and remembering that even small steps in the right direction can have a big impact over time. Sounds like a pretty solid recipe for a more fulfilling life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's what Ramadan is all about. It's about striving to become the best versions of ourselves.
Speaking of becoming the best versions of ourselves, the research you sent me actually highlights 5 key ways to strengthen our iman, our faith, not just during Ramadan, but throughout the year. It's like leveling up our spiritual game, ready to unlock those power-ups.
I think our listeners are definitely ready to level up. Let's hear them.
All right, power-up number 1 is praying Salah on time.
Yeah.
It's considered the strongest connection between a believer and Allah, and it's said that Shaytan really hates it.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
It makes sense when you think about it. Prayer is a powerful act of worship. It helps protect us from sin and strengthens our faith.
Yeah, it's like putting on a spiritual suit of armor.
Exactly.
Power-up number 2 is reading the Quran daily. It's guidance. It's healing for the heart. The more we engage with it, the less room Shaytan has to whisper his doubts and temptations.
Yeah, it's like filling our minds with light, leaving no space for darkness to creep in.
I love that analogy. Okay, power-up number 3 is making dua supplications for protection. The Prophet Muhammad actually taught specific duas for seeking protection against Shaytan.
Oh, wow.
What are some of those?
One of the most powerful ones is simply, "O Allah, I seek refuge in you from the accursed Shaytan." It's a simple prayer, but incredibly effective.
Like putting up a spiritual force field. Power-up number 4, and this is a big one, is surrounding yourself with righteous people.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
That's so important. Being around people who remind you of Allah, who encourage you to do good and stay on the right path, it makes a world of difference. It's like having a spiritual support system cheering you on and keeping you accountable.
And Shaytan hates it because he knows there's strength in numbers, right? We can uplift and support each other on our spiritual journeys. Finally, power-up number 5 is to be mindful of what we consume. And I'm not just talking about food.
Right.
It's about avoiding things that are haram, forbidden, or even those that fall into a gray area.
Yes, Shaitan loves to trap people in doubtful matters, things that aren't clearly right or wrong. If something feels off, if it makes you question your values, it's best to steer clear.
Trust your gut. It's better to be safe than sorry. So there you have it, folks. 5 spiritual power-ups to help you level up your faith and resist those negative influences, not just during Ramadan, but all year round.
Yeah, like a cheat code for a more fulfilling, meaningful life.
I love that. So the secret of Ramadan isn't just about Shaitan being chained up for a month. It's about recognizing the power we have within ourselves to resist temptation, to choose good over evil, and to stay connected to our Creator.
It's about taking those lessons we learned during Ramadan and weaving them into the fabric of our lives.
It's about making a conscious choice every single day to strive for righteousness.
And remembering that we have the strength to make that choice no matter what challenges we face.
That's such a powerful message. So I want to leave you with this question. How will you use the lessons of Ramadan to stay strong in your faith throughout the year?
What changes will you make? What habits will you continue to cultivate?
What steps will you take to keep those spiritual power-ups activated?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your insights and commitments with us on social media using #DeepDiveRamadan.
And remember, no matter what challenges you face, no matter how many times you stumble, never give up on your spiritual journey.
The gates of paradise are always open to those who sincerely seek them.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder the deeper meaning of Ramadan. Until next time, keep diving deep.